Hi, Internet. Welcome to the Troyan YouTube channel. It is Thin Lizzy Thursday, and this is another random song. But after this, we've got the audience vote back, so make sure you check out the polls. Should be out now, hopefully. Hopefully, I remembered. But like I said, thank you guys so much for putting up with me as I recorded these in bulk so I could have some time to work on other stuff during a very, very busy month. And this week's song is, like I said, random, so I have no idea what we're getting into. Gonna fire up the random number generator, see what song gives us. And this week's music, we're gonna listen to Frozen Wonderland by Yoko Shimomura because, look, nothing gets you in the mood for spring/summer like a song from Arendelle, right? So yeah, let's just see what we're doing this week, kids. Ah, man, I have a sneaking suspicion that this won't be as good as what we were just listening to. Ah, man. Okay, so this is Blackstar Riders off their Heavy Fire album, which I don't care what anyone says. That is a great album cover. For all the hate that BSR gets on this channel in the comments, I love this album cover. This is one of the best album covers in the Lizzy Blackstar Riders catalog. Like, period. Like, this is a great album cover. It's called Heavy Fire, and it's got this strong man, and he's lifting the weights, but it's on fire. Like that's a cool album cover. Just gonna say it. Hopefully the song is cool. Oh man, oof. Looking at these lyrics, maybe. Yeah. Probably not. You know what? Let's just do it. Let's just get it over with.
All you need is Jesus and a 44, a contradiction in faith, and a sprung dance floor. The pulse of a nation at war with its own. Tonight we're gonna party
Okay, so ah man, saying let's get this over with set a bad precedent, I think. Because here's the thing, I feel like with Black Star Riders, I did like that first album a lot, and I did like a couple tracks off the second album. And I think I wonder, like, have I done too much with Black Star Riders to quit now? Like, would it be? I know everyone's just like, just drop Black Star Riders from the catalog, but like, I feel like we've gone far enough in that we might as well just like finish it up and find the good songs. So it's like, ah man, yeah, this song. I mean, like musically, I just don't really care for it. It's how do I put it? It's so macho, but like the like it's like a it feels like an insecure macho, like the kind of macho that doesn't like resonate with me. It's just like I'm a tough biker guy, and it's like you know like I can wear like my leather pants and stuff, but also like I'm cool with like listening to music from Frozen and stuff. So like I don't need to be like this freaking macho. And I think the reason why Thin Lizzy worked for me is that like Phil was macho, but it didn't feel like it felt like there was like another layer to him. And even when he was being as macho and tough as he was, like there was maybe a layer of like poetry and like intelligence. Like he always had that mixture of like the macho with the singer songwriter, and it wasn't like too much of one or the other. And like as much as I love Sylvester Stallone, you know, he also has like that tenderness, and like the character of Rocky can be like very tender and gentle and caring and comedic, and this just feels like it's like musically, it just feels like closer to Pantera than Thin Lizzy in terms of like the macho vibe that it gives off. Not necessarily like it's definitely not going to be as heavy or down tuned as Pantera, but like that energy is more what I'm getting from the track. So what's interesting is that from the lyrics of Black Star Riders that I've dissected previously and listened to, they seem to be like anti Second Amendment. They seem to be more in favor of gun control and stuff. And the song, like the way the lyrics are written, you can kind of interpret it like either way, either as being like a pro gun song or an anti gun song. You could look at it either way. And I think with the musicality behind it and the sort of vagueness of the lyrics, it ends up, I think, coming off as like a more pro Second Amendment song, which interesting is that like I've actually been doing like some reading on the subject, and the modern like NRA interpretation is just like completely off base from like what the founders intended with the Second Amendment. So, and this is actually kind of cool and an interesting like fact. So basically, the reason the Second Amendment was written the way that it was, and this is a tangent, but like it mentioned the Second Amendment in the song. So, and forgive me, I haven't read about this in like maybe like a month or two, but basically the the reason the Second Amendment was written was not so that people could have like guns and own guns individually. It wasn't like all about the right to bear arms. Like it's in there, but that wasn't the most important point. The reason they wrote the Second Amendment was because they didn't want to have standing armies, because they felt that would lead to potential conflicts, and also that the military might try to overthrow the government in a military coup, because they had seen, militaries overthrow governments before, and they didn't want that in the United States. So they thought that it was better not to have a standing army and to instead have like a bunch of local militias and then call them in when the United States entered into war or needed an army, so that the local militias would be ready, but there'd be no federal United States army. They just had the plan of having the local militias and then having them like be organized and act as the law enforcement, and then making them be the army when the country as a whole needed them. So it wasn't specifically for the goal of just like, everyone needs a gun. It was more the government was being like kind of lazy and not wanting an army because of the potential downsides to having a standing army. And so then once the United States developed a standing army, that was like I'm trying to say that I'm not explaining it well. There are other people who could explain it way better. Tom Hartman wrote on it really greatly, so I recommend looking into Tom Hartman's writings about the Second Amendment. But it's really fascinating stuff. So the point is saying the whole like oh man, everyone needs an AR-15 is like definitely not like what the point of the text was. It was just like, hey, like we don't really want to have a standing army, so make sure like people are ready in case we need an army. Um, was the point of that?
Sleep with the enemy. Feral as you wanna be. Cowboys and Indians. Say hello to my little friend. Who rides the tigers? Who rides the tigers? Who rides the tigers?
Nice. That was a good ending. I liked the solo. Yeah, you know what? I dig it. Well, I don't know. I dig the ending. It definitely got to go to the ending, but I don't know how much I enjoy the overall song. It's fine, I guess. I don't know. Lyrically, could afford to be a little bit clearer. And like I said, I didn't like the energy for most of it. Not to be all hippy dippy. Um, yeah. Yeah, the solo was too good. Yeah, you know what? I'm sorry. Just freaking sex child. Always gonna be ranking towards the bottom after really thinking about the lyrics. And all right. So at this point, the video is basically done. You are free to click off. But make sure you vote in the poll. Make sure you're subscribed. I found a video of Tom Hartman about the Second Amendment, and so I'm going to listen to it and react to it while I'm here. But like, if you don't care, you can just like go away. I'm gonna just it's gonna be like 5 minutes. I'm gonna double speed it, so you're free to go. But I'm gonna react to this just because I'm here.
About what?
What you were saying earlier about the thought process of the people who wrote the Constitution and the Second Amendment.
Right.
I'd love for you to be one of those guys with a coffee mug and sign saying prove me wrong. You're gonna have to explain it to me. I don't see how, given that these people just overthrew a government that was oppressive, they had to use their guns in order to do that. Why they would not be thinking when they wrote in the Second Amendment that, hey, we're going to need to use the same weapons that the government might have if we ever need to do this again. And they are of the understanding that a government can become so oppressive in order to do that.
Sure. The reason that they weren't thinking like that. Yeah, no, it's a good and serious question, Josh. The reason they weren't thinking like that and they weren't talking like that, and I encourage you to go back and read Madison's notes on the Constitutional Convention. He took copious notes, and in particular the notes on the Virginia ratifying convention, which was the convention where they ratified they were debating whether or not to adopt the Constitution. The Constitution was written in the summer of 1787. The Virginia ratifying convention was summer of 1788, and in the fall of 1789 is when the Constitution was adopted and we became a country. And then 2 years later, or 3 years later, 1791 is when we got the Bill of Rights, which included the Second Amendment. But the Second Amendment was passed around. The first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, were passed around with the Constitution in 1788, and it became a huge huge topic of discussion at the Virginia Ratifying Convention because of the objections of Patrick Henry. So, number one, in answer to your question, just a straight up answer to your question, the reason why they didn't think that they would ever have to have guns to overthrow the government of the United States is because it was a completely different type of government. They were creating a democracy. They had overthrown a kingdom. Kingdoms are completely, consequentially, totally different kinds of governments. Democracies, these guys were true believers. They believed that a democracy would survive. They believed that a democracy would produce the very best outcome, and that a democracy would have to defend itself. And in fact, there were a couple of rebellions. Shays' Rebellion is probably the most famous. Where George Washington and his buddies put down the rebellions. So they definitely weren't thinking about, gee, we want a little rebellion. Thomas Jefferson's comments when he was in Paris about the French Revolution, periodically, the tree of liberty needs to be watered with the blood of patriots. He was speaking of the French Revolution, in support of the French Revolution. Those comments notwithstanding, nobody among the founding generation was saying, someday in the future, this government that we're creating, we, the people, are going to have to destroy. It just didn't happen.
So you honestly believe that?
No, it's a matter of belief. I wrote a book about this, Josh, and all the footnotes and all the references are in it. It's called The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment. I spent a year researching it, and I'm telling you, this is my belief. This is the actual history. I don't know what kind of feedback you got going on there, but turn it down. So number one, there were two issues at debate with regard to the Second Amendment. The first was that Jefferson and his contingent, what ultimately became the Democratic Republican Party, today's Democratic Party, back then there were no political parties at the time that this was written. The Federalist was the first party to emerge, and that was at the tail end of the George Washington administration. So back then, the big fear when the Constitution was being written was not that our government would become oppressive. The big fear was, generally speaking, that the military within our government could overthrow the government. They had seen governments in Europe that had been quasi or semi-democratic, where the power of the king had been reduced, the power of the legislature had been increased. Holland was probably, or the Netherlands, one of the better examples of that. It wasn't one of the ones that suffered an internal military coup, but they'd seen this over and over through 1,000 years of history, that when governments got overthrown, they were almost never overthrown by the people. They were almost always overthrown by the military. And so the argument that Jefferson put forward, and he was so outspoken about this, there's at least a dozen letters he wrote about this, including to the convention and including to, published in newspapers and everything, was that we should not have a standing army during a time of peace, because a standing army is the mother of all mischief. It was his phrase, that a standing army has the potential to rise up and overthrow the country, a military coup, like what happened in Egypt just a couple of years ago. And so his solution to that, and there was this huge debate about how do we prevent a standing army from being a threat to a nation. And his solution was, don't have a standing army during times of peace. Only have every state have a militia, the equivalent of what we would today call the National Guard. And during a time of national emergency, the federal government, the president, can call up those state militias. And that's in the Constitution. It's in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. And so Jefferson argued we should have no standing army. We should have a standing navy. And in fact, again, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution specifically says we can have a navy. But and this is the amazing thing, Josh. There's only one place in the entire Constitution where the ability of Congress to raise money and spend money is time limited. Only one place in the whole Constitution. And it's in Article 1, Section 8, and it says that no appropriation, I'm doing this from memory, but this is pretty close, no appropriation for funding the Army shall last more than 2 years. It's right there in the Constitution. And it's still the law today. Congress can appropriate all the money they want for the Pentagon, but it cannot extend for more than a 2-year period. So in other words, it forced Congress every 2 years to decide, do we want to have a military, or do we want to have all these state militias that the president could call up? And that was the conclusion that they came to. When Jefferson came into office, there were over 400,000 men in the U.S. Army. Actually, I think the number was like 370,000. It was in the neighborhood of 400,000 men in the U.S. Army. When Jefferson became president in 1801, in March of 1801, he dialed that back to around 6,000 people because he wanted to get rid of the standing army. So by the time he left office in 1809, in January or March of 1809, our army was gone. We had a very strong navy at that point, but we had basically no army, which is why and how the British and the Canadians could just march in from Quebec and burn the White House down in the War of 1812. And so that whole debate about whether we should have a standing army or not, which was a hot debate from the 1770s right up until the end of the Jefferson presidency, that debate ended with the War of 1812. Because after the War of 1812, in 1815, when that war was resolved, everybody agreed we need to have a standing army. And we have had a standing army ever since. So that was one of the reasons why, that was the main reason, that was 90% of why the Second Amendment was written the way it was, why it was put in the Constitution the way it was, to prevent a standing army and provide a backup being the state militias. The second reason the Second Amendment was altered, in that Virginia ratifying convention, James Madison was there, he's the father of the Constitution, he was shopping around this stuff, with the Bill of Rights, including the Second Amendment, and Patrick Henry, who was the largest slaveholder in Virginia, gets up and gives this long speech in which he points out that there's over 300,000 black people in Virginia, and they're all enslaved. And if they ever rise up against the state, the white people in Virginia are screwed. And the thing that could end the ability of Virginia to keep those black people in enslavement would be if the federal government called up their militia, for just for the hell of it. If the president was an abolitionist and he said, I'm going to end slavery in Virginia, if they got an Abraham Lincoln in the White House, all he had to do was call up the Virginia militia, because the Virginia militia was also the Virginia Slave Patrol. And so the original Second Amendment said for the security of a free nation. And in deference to Patrick Henry, James Madison changed that language to for the security of a free state, so that the individual states, there were 4 states at the time that had militias that were also simultaneously slave patrols: Georgia, South Carolina, Virginia, and I believe the other one was Alabama. I could be wrong. It's in my book. And that's the history of the Second Amendment. None of it had to do with thinking, gee, maybe someday in the future we're going to need to kill politicians in America. Never even discussed. Josh, thanks for a great question.
All right, so yeah, that is the kind of stuff I listen to when I'm at work, and yes, I usually listen to it at double speed. So there you go. Now you get a little insight into the head of Greg. Man, I'm so grateful to live in the internet age, because there is so much of like a wealth of access to information and knowledge, where you do have to deal with like misinformation and incorrect facts, and people just just because someone posts something online doesn't mean it's real. But the fact that there's the wealth of human knowledge available if you're just willing to dig for it is just really incredible. I love learning and growing and discovering new things, and I love learning about history, and I think it's really important, because I think that helps when you look at the mistakes of the past, you try not to repeat them for the sake of the future. So I think it's I personally find it very important to study history. I find it very gratifying, and yeah, as far as the Second Amendment, I think that not to get too political on it, but I think that if we can regulate cars and regulate voting, we can regulate guns. I think it is entirely reasonable to have, um, if you have to register to vote, you should have to, register, your firearms and I liked what John Stewart says. Like, we should have a tracking system for guns, and treat each bullet like it has like a fingerprint almost, so that they know where everything's going and stuff. So that's a whole can of worms. But yep, definitely appreciate you guys watching. Yep, and audience vote should be out now. And yeah, we're done. Bye everyone.